Hello family, welcome to Excited Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us. It means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you. As you do so, sit back and relax as we dive into the story. She left me when I needed her most, but my comeback left her speechless. It started with a phone call. I was sitting at my desk, eyes glued to the screen, trying to make sense of the numbers blinking back at me. My startup, my dream for the last 4 years, was collapsing. Investors had pulled out, the market shifted, and a crucial deal that was supposed to close that morning had crumbled into dust. I knew what was coming: the layoffs, the shutdown. The sleepless nights already felt like they had never ended. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone to call the one person who had always promised to be there. Melanie, my girlfriend of 5 years. But she didn't pick up. I tried again and again. A text came back an hour later. "Can we talk later? I'm with friends." I didn't have the energy to argue. I drove home in silence, the streetlights blurring through the windshield as I parked in front of our apartment. I expected her to greet me with a hug, maybe some reassurance that we'd get through it together. Instead, I found her packing a suitcase. She didn't even look surprised to see me. "I think we need some space," she said. Just like that. No tears, no emotion. Her tone was mechanical, rehearsed. She avoided my eyes while folding her favorite jeans into the bag. "Space?" I echoed, stunned. "Mel, my company just collapsed. I'm broke. I need you." "That's exactly the problem, Jake," she said, finally facing me. "You always need something. I can't keep carrying your messes. I have my own life." I watched her walk out with that suitcase, like she hadn't just shattered me with a few cold words. The door clicked behind her, and silence fell over the apartment like a heavy fog. The following weeks were a blur of despair. I sold off what was left of the business, pennies on the dollar. My bank account bled red. I moved out of our shared apartment and into a tiny studio near the edge of town, the kind where the heating barely worked and the pipes groaned at night. I cut off most people. Friends, family, everyone. I didn't want their pity. I could still hear Melanie's voice in my head, that cold dismissal. "You always need something." That line stung more than anything. Maybe she was right. Maybe I had leaned on her too much. But wasn't that what love was about? Standing together when things got rough? I spent my days applying for jobs and my nights staring at the ceiling. Rejection emails flooded my inbox. I'd gone from CEO to not a good fit in less than a month. One night, as I sat in that cramped apartment surrounded by pizza boxes and unopened mail, something shifted in me. I stared at my reflection in the dark window and barely recognized the man I'd become, sunken eyes, unshaven, hollow. I couldn't let this be the end. I had nothing left to lose. That night, I made a plan. I started waking up before dawn. No more lying in bed past noon. No more feeling sorry for myself. I got up, made coffee, black and bitter, and stared down the long list of things I needed to do. I wasn't entirely sure what comeback looked like yet, but I knew it had to start somewhere. My first step was survival. I picked up a job delivering groceries. It wasn't glamorous. In fact, it was humiliating at first. I'd gone from leading team meetings in a glass-walled boardroom to hauling heavy bags of produce into high-rise apartments, sweating through my clothes and smiling for tips. But for the first time in a long time, I was earning something, no matter how small. That feeling of effort translating into reward reignited something in me. Every evening after deliveries, I spent hours studying. I enrolled in free courses on coding, digital marketing, and finance. I devoured books, listened to podcasts, and filled notebooks with business ideas and market trends. I couldn't afford a mentor, so I made mentors out of authors and YouTubers. And then, one afternoon while delivering to an upscale condo, I saw Melanie. She was walking out of the building, laughing with a guy in a fitted blazer. He opened the car door for her, and she climbed in without seeing me. I froze behind a stack of grocery bags. That was the life she wanted now. Clean, shiny, curated. I was invisible to her. Instead of anger, what I felt was clarity. She hadn't left because I failed. She left because I stopped being convenient, and I couldn't blame her entirely. I had built a relationship based on what I needed instead of who I was. That wouldn't happen again. By month 6, I had a rough idea for a new business. Not a startup, not a risky invention, but a service. I'd seen how difficult it was for small businesses to transition online after the pandemic. Many of them lacked basic digital presence, websites, social media, online stores. I could help with that. Using every cent I had saved from deliveries, I launched Local Bridge. I built simple websites, set up Google listings, created Facebook pages, and offered package deals small shops could afford. My first client was a neighborhood bakery run by an elderly couple. They paid me $150 and gave me a loaf of sourdough. It was the best deal I'd ever made. Word spread faster than I expected. I was scrappy, cheap, and reliable. Within 3 months, I had 20 local clients. I reinvested every dollar, bought better equipment, and hired a part-time assistant, my old college friend Leo, who had just been laid off. He believed in the mission. We didn't have an office. We worked from coffee shops and his garage, but we were building something real. I started documenting the journey online, just short videos and before and after shots of client websites. One of them went viral. Suddenly I had emails from all over the country. Local Bridge was no longer just local. And then came the investment offer. A former client turned mentor introduced me to a group of angel investors who were intrigued by the model. Low overhead, high demand, and room to scale. I pitched the concept in a shaky Zoom call from my apartment. I didn't wear a suit, just a clean hoodie and jeans. I told them the truth. I wasn't a genius. I'd just been to hell and decided I wasn't staying. They saw potential. They offered $150,000 in seed funding. When I hung up the call, I sat still for a full minute. Then I laughed, not out of joy, but out of disbelief. Just 9 months earlier, I'd been sleeping on a mattress on the floor, wondering if I even mattered. Now, I had a business, a team, and a future. And the best part? I wasn't doing it for revenge. I was doing it for me. But revenge was coming anyway. The buzz started small. A repost here, a comment there. A business magazine did a short feature on Local Bridge under a section called Startups to Watch in 2025. That tiny article changed everything. Suddenly, my inbox was full. Small businesses from other cities started reaching out, asking for help. Some were mom-and-pop shops trying to recover from post-pandemic losses. Others were startups like mine, barely keeping the lights on. I couldn't help everyone, but I made it a point to respond to each message personally. People remembered that. We had to expand, quickly. I brought on 2 more freelancers, both out-of-work marketing grads who worked for peanuts but poured in their passion. We moved out of Leo's garage into a shared office space in the city. It wasn't much, just a single room with peeling paint and 1 decent coffee machine. But it was ours. Every step felt like a victory. And then came the podcast invite. A well-known entrepreneur, Michelle Durant, ran a popular business podcast called Grit and Growth. She'd read about Local Bridge in a newsletter and reached out. "Your story," she said over email, "is what people need to hear right now." I hesitated. I wasn't a polished speaker. My story wasn't smooth or glamorous, but she insisted. I sat down in her studio, nervous as hell, fidgeting with the sleeves of my jacket. We talked for over an hour. I told her everything, from the collapse of my first company to Melanie leaving me with a suitcase and no warning. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. The story was about loss, about resilience, about finding your worth when no one else sees it. The episode aired 2 weeks later. By the end of the day, we had 1,000 new followers on Instagram and over 100 DMs asking for consultations. Our website crashed from traffic. Clients were no longer local. They were global. And with the spotlight came attention from places I hadn't expected. One afternoon, while walking into a new client meeting at a coffee shop, I saw her. Melanie. She was sitting alone, tapping away, on her phone. Her hair was shorter now, sleeker, and she wore a sharp-looking blazer. She looked up just as I reached the counter. Her eyes widened. She blinked like she wasn't sure if it was really me. "Jake?" she said, half standing. I smiled politely, nodded, and turned back to the barista. "Can I talk to you?" she asked, stepping toward me. Just for a minute? There was a flicker in her eyes, something between regret and disbelief. Sure, I said, calm as a lake. We sat outside, the air cool and clean. She fumbled with her cup, her confident exterior peeling away like chipped paint. I saw your interview, she said. The podcast. You're doing really well. I'm doing. All right, I replied, still learning. She paused. I didn't expect that. I mean, after everything. Neither did I wanted to say. But instead, I let her speak. I shouldn't have left the way I did, she said quietly. I thought you'd drown. And maybe I didn't. Want to watch. There it was. Not an apology. Not really. Just an excuse wrapped in honesty. I nodded. We all make choices. She looked down at her hands. You look good. Different. I did feel different. Stronger. Grounded. And in that moment, I realized something that surprised me. I wasn't angry anymore. I had made peace with the past. She stood to leave, hesitated, then offered a small smile. I'm glad you made it. As I watched her walk away, I felt nothing but clarity. The kind that only comes after you've lost everything and built it back with your own hands. She had left me when I was broken. Now I was whole again. And the world was watching. The morning, after I saw Melanie again, I didn't dwell on it. There was no emotional hangover, no desire to rehash the past. I had work to do, people to lead, and a growing vision to fulfill. The old me would have taken that encounter as a signal, maybe tried to revisit something that had already died. But the new me, he understood the difference between nostalgia and progress. We moved into a bigger space by spring. It had tall windows, creaky wooden floors, and a view of the city that made every sunrise feel like a promise. I let the team decorate it however they wanted. Plants, quirky art, a messy coffee bar that somehow always had just the right kind of chaos. Local Bridge had grown from a survival hustle into a full-fledged digital agency with clients across 5 states. We expanded services, SEO, content, brand storytelling, and even launched a mentorship program for teen entrepreneurs in low-income areas. That one meant the most to me. I knew what it felt like to have dreams and no map to get there. We hired more people who had also been overlooked, laid off, or told they weren't the right fit. Our interviews weren't about resumes. They were about grit, hunger, and honesty. The kind of things that don't show up on paper. Then came the email. From Forbes. They were doing a profile on entrepreneurs who'd rebuilt themselves from failure. Somehow, someone had pitched my name. I reread the email 6 times before responding. The article ran under the headline, The Fall and Rise of Jake Merrill, How One Man Rebuilt His Life After Losing It All. It was surreal. My inbox exploded. LinkedIn requests poured in. I got messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years, including my former business partner Darren, who had vanished the day my first startup went under. Proud of you, man, he wrote. Didn't see that coming. Neither did I. But I also didn't need his validation anymore. One evening, after everyone had gone home, I stayed late at the office. I sat by the window with a cup of coffee and stared at the skyline, the sun dipping below the buildings like a curtain closing on an old play. My phone buzzed. It was a message from my mom. Saw your article. Your dad would be proud. We both are. Call me soon. I smiled. That night, I realized something important. I wasn't just building a company. I was building myself. From the ground up. And every brick, every hard lesson, every failure was part of the foundation. But success has a way of stirring ghosts. A few days later, I got another message. From Melanie. This one was different. I know it's probably not my place. But can we talk? Not about the past, just talk. I stared at the message for a long time. Not out of hope or resentment, but curiosity. We met for coffee. Again. Same shop. Same table. But everything else had changed. She looked nervous this time, her confidence replaced with something softer. I've been thinking a lot, she said, about choices, about what matters. You probably don't want to hear this, but I regret leaving the way I did. I sipped my drink, waiting. I thought you'd fall apart, she continued. But instead, you became someone I don't even recognize, in a good way. I don't know if I'm saying this right. I just wanted you to know, I see you now. Really see you. I nodded slowly. Thank you. I appreciate that. She looked like she wanted more. Maybe a second chance. But I didn't offer it. Instead, I smiled and stood. Take care, Mel. As I walked away, I felt weightless. There was no anger, no regret. Just freedom. The kind that comes when you finally understand your worth and realize that it never depended on someone else's love. I had started over, not for revenge, not for applause, but for me. And this time, I was just getting started. Just when I thought the past had been neatly folded and packed away, it showed up again, unexpected, uninvited, and just as messy as before. It started with a LinkedIn message from Darren, my former business partner, the same one who disappeared when our startup went under. He hadn't just vanished physically, he'd also ducked responsibility. While I scrambled to hold things together, Darren quietly distanced himself from the collapse. And when things got ugly, unpaid invoices, legal threats, he ghosted entirely. Now here he was, 2 years later, reaching out like nothing had happened. Hey Jake, been following your journey. Really impressed with what you've built. Would love to reconnect. I've got an idea I think you'll want to hear. My first instinct was to ignore him, but curiosity has a strange grip, and part of me wanted to know what he had to say, if only to finally close the book on that chapter. We met at a trendy rooftop bar downtown. Darren looked the same, smooth-talking, polished, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my first few months of rent in the studio I once lived in. He greeted me with that familiar grin, like we were old friends catching up over drinks instead of former co-founders whose partnership ended in disaster. You've done well, he said, sliding me a drink. Really well. Saw the Forbes piece. Honestly, man, I knew you had it in you. Did you? I asked, calm but cold. Because you weren't around to say that when things fell apart. His smile faltered. Yeah, I deserved that. I messed up. I panicked. But I've grown since then, and I think we've both learned a lot. He launched into his pitch, a new AI-focused venture, scalable and sleek, with potential investors already circling. He wanted me to come on board as co-founder, said my reputation would open doors. I sat back, studying him. The old Jake, the desperate, approval-seeking version, might have leaned forward, eager to rebuild what we once lost. But I wasn't that man anymore. I'm not interested, I said. I built something real. I'm not chasing shiny objects anymore. Darren blinked, clearly thrown. You sure? This could be big. I'm already building something that is big, I replied. And it's mine. He didn't argue, just nodded slowly and raised his glass. Then cheers to that. We parted with a handshake that felt like a formality. I walked away knowing I'd finally made peace with that betrayal. Not because Darren had changed, but because I had. But the past wasn't done with me yet. Later that week, I got an email from a nonprofit in the city. They were hosting a local business expo and wanted me to give the keynote address. It wasn't just about sharing business strategies. It was about sharing the story, the struggle, the lessons, the reinvention. They called it resilience in action. I almost said no. The thought of standing on a stage, talking about the worst moments of my life to a room full of strangers, made my stomach twist. But then, I remembered all the nights I had spent staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd ever matter again. This was my chance to show someone else that they could rise too. The auditorium was packed. I stepped up to the mic with sweaty palms and a racing heart. But once I started talking about failure, fear, loneliness, and rebuilding, I saw faces nodding, eyes locked in, people leaning forward. Not because I was impressive, but because I was honest. Afterward, dozens of people came up to shake my hand, share their own stories, or simply say, "Thank you." And then, in the back of the crowd, I saw her, Melanie, again. But this time she didn't approach. She just stood there, arms crossed, a strange expression on her face, somewhere between pride and pain. She had left me when I was at my lowest. Now, she was watching me stand tall, on my own, and I didn't need to say a word. The past might come knocking, but it no longer had the power to break me. After the keynote, everything changed. I used to think that success was measured by numbers, clients, revenue, staff count, but standing on that stage, sharing my truth with hundreds of strangers, I discovered something far more valuable: my voice, and more importantly, the power it held. The event organizers uploaded my speech online. Within a week, it had over 200,000 views. Messages poured in from people all over the world, some struggling through job loss, others trying to recover after a breakup or betrayal. One guy wrote, "I watched your talk while sitting in my car after being laid off. I didn't feel so alone after hearing you." I started getting invitations to speak at colleges, business panels, community workshops. At first, I wasn't sure if I was qualified to inspire anyone. I didn't have a TED Talk stage or a fancy degree in resilience, but I had lived through the kind of pain and rebuilding that no textbook could teach. So I leaned into it. I began hosting monthly online sessions called the Bounce Back Room. People showed up. A lot of them. Not just aspiring entrepreneurs, but nurses, single parents, laid-off factory workers, teachers. Anyone who had been knocked down and was clawing their way back up. We didn't talk about perfection. We talked about survival, about finding the first crack of light in a pitch-black tunnel. I shared what I had learned: how to sit with failure, how to separate your worth from your bank account, how to begin again with nothing but your name. Each session I learned more about myself too. The more I spoke, the clearer my purpose became. I wasn't just building a business, I was helping build people, starting with myself. One night after a session, I checked my inbox and saw a message that stopped me cold. It was from Melanie. Again. But this time, the message wasn't about reconnecting, it was longer, more honest. "Jake, I watched your keynote, and your last 2 sessions. I cried. Not because I miss what we had, but because I realized how much I misunderstood who you were. I thought you were weak because you were struggling. I didn't see that you were trying harder than anyone. I walked away when I should have stayed, not to fix you, but to learn from you. I just wanted you to know that I see you now, fully, and I'm sorry I didn't before." I read the message twice, maybe 3 times, and then I hit archive, not out of anger, but because I didn't need closure anymore. I had already closed that door. A week later, I got an invitation to speak at a national conference, something big. Fortune 500 sponsors, high-profile names, a sea of polished professionals. Imposter syndrome crept in for a second. Then I reminded myself, you belong here because you got here the hard way. At the event, I shared my story again. But this time, I told it differently. Not like a wound that needed bandaging, but like a battle I had survived. I ended with a line I hadn't planned. To say, sometimes the people who leave you at your lowest are doing you a favor. Because when you rise without them, you realize that your worth was never tied to whether they stayed. The room went quiet. Then, a standing ovation. I walked off stage and didn't look back. Later that night, I sat in my hotel room alone, not feeling lonely, but proud, not of the speech, but of the journey. I had found my voice. And with it, a power that no one could ever take away again. There was a moment, not long after the conference, when I caught myself laughing, really laughing, over something small: a spilled coffee, a bad pun from one of my interns, a joke someone made in the office Slack channel. And I realized something. I wasn't waiting for happiness anymore. I was living in it. The pain, the betrayal, the loss. It no longer defined me. I wasn't carrying it like armor or weaponry. It had become part of the ground I walked on, solid and behind me. Local Bridge was no longer just surviving. It was thriving. We moved into a proper office downtown. This one had glass walls, a rooftop break area, and a long wooden conference table where we held weekly brainstorms. We had a full-time staff of 15 and worked with clients across 3 continents. We'd become known not just for our results, but for our heart. Our story was part of our brand, and people respected that. And I had changed too. I started waking up early, not out of stress, but out of purpose. I went to the gym. I read again. I even adopted a dog, an old rescue mutt with graying fur and a crooked tail I named Winston. He followed me everywhere and slept curled up under my desk while I worked. My life felt full. Not in a flashy social media highlight reel kind of way, but in the quiet, meaningful kind of way that matters most. I even started dating again. Carefully. Slowly. Her name was Alana. We met at a bookstore of all places. She was browsing the self-development section, and we reached for the same title. Cliché maybe, but it sparked something. She asked what I did, and I told her the truth. Not the resume version, but the real one. And she didn't flinch. She listened, asked questions. We ended up sitting on a bench outside the store for hours, talking like old friends who were just catching up. With Alana, there were no games, no performances, just a softness, a respect, a quiet strength that mirrored my own. We didn't rush. We didn't label anything too soon. But we shared meals, stories, slow Sunday walks. And slowly, a new chapter began to write itself. One built, not on need, but on choice. One night, as we stood on my balcony watching the city lights shimmer like stars, she said, "You carry yourself like someone who's walked through fire, but you don't smell like smoke." It hit me harder than I expected. She didn't know the half of it, but maybe she didn't need to. The man I was now didn't need to prove how far he'd come. He was the proof. One afternoon, as I sat in a cafe finalizing a proposal for a client, I saw Melanie walk by on the sidewalk. She looked different, hardened, maybe tired. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did and chose not to stop. Either way, I didn't move. I didn't feel the urge to say anything, because there was nothing left to say. She had left me when I was broken, uncertain, and searching for myself, and I had rebuilt my life, piece by piece, without her. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need applause. I didn't even need acknowledgement. All I needed was the peace that now settled around me like a quiet, steady heartbeat. I finished my coffee, smiled to myself, and sent off the proposal that would land our biggest client yet. This life, the one I built from ashes and silence, was mine. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like enough. It happened on a Wednesday. I was scheduled to speak at an awards gala. Nothing too extravagant, just a local recognition event for entrepreneurs who had made a significant community impact. My team insisted I attend. They even rented me a tux. I wasn't much for tuxedos, but I went along with it because it wasn't really about me anymore. It was about everything we'd built. The venue was buzzing, champagne glasses clinking, cameras flashing, conversations swirling with ambition and celebration. I was nominated for Entrepreneur of the Year, an honor I didn't expect to win, but appreciated nonetheless. As I stood at the back of the room, sipping a sparkling water and talking with a few fellow nominees, I saw her again. Melanie. This time, she was seated near the stage, looking poised in a sleek black dress, a man next to her who looked vaguely familiar, probably someone she was dating now. She hadn't seen me yet. I didn't flinch. I didn't feel the sting that used to follow every encounter. I didn't feel anything, really, just calm. The kind of calm that comes from knowing you've already had the final word, even if you never spoke it aloud. When they announced my name as the winner, I froze for a moment. People clapped. My team stood and cheered. I walked to the stage slowly, trying to keep my heart steady. But when I reached the microphone, I caught sight of her in the crowd. She was staring at me, eyes wide, lips slightly parted, stunned. She had never seen this version of me. Not the man who broke down on his apartment floor. Not the man she walked away from when his life was collapsing. No. This was the man who rose. Quietly. Relentlessly. Entirely without her. I took the mic and paused. This award means more than I can explain. I began. Not because of what it says, but because of where it started. A few years ago, I had nothing. I had lost my business, my relationship, my confidence, and truthfully, myself. I glanced at her again. She didn't move. But I learned something during that time. I continued. When people leave you at your worst, you learn how to become your best. Alone. You learn that your value isn't dependent on who believes in you. It's built when you start believing in yourself. A hush fell over the room. You could hear every breath. I didn't make a comeback for applause. I didn't do it to prove anyone wrong. I did it because I had a choice, stay broken or rebuild, and I chose to rebuild. Applause roared around the room. But I wasn't watching the crowd. I was watching her. Melanie sat frozen, her expression unreadable, the man beside her clapping politely. But she didn't look at him. She looked at me. And for the first time, I saw it. The realization, the weight of everything she had thrown away. I gave a small nod, stepped back, and left the stage. After the event, I didn't stick around long. My team wanted to celebrate, but I had other plans. I walked out into the cool night air, unfastened my tie, and stood for a moment under the streetlight. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Jake? It was her. I turned. Melanie stood there looking like she had rehearsed this moment 100 times, but never planned how it might actually feel. That speech, she said, her voice cracking. I didn't know. I know, I said. She looked at me for a long moment. You became someone amazing. I always was, I replied softly. You just couldn't see it. She blinked, stunned by the words. I didn't expect you to say that. I didn't expect to live it, I said. But I did. And with that, I walked away. No drama. No lingering glances. Just peace. That was my comeback, and it left her speechless.